Welcome to the final hour on a Tuesday morning on the Gary Sutton Show here on WSBA. And we have with us this particular segment a guy I think is one of the best columnists in the country. In fact, he's been an American military historian, columnist, former classics professor, a scholar of ancient warfare. He's been a commentator on modern warfare, contemporary politics for National Review, and it goes on and on and on. But he wrote a column last week called A Beat Up, Exhausted, and Terrified Republican Establishment, and we're talking about Victor Davis Hanson, who joins us this morning live from California. Good morning, Mr. Hanson. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you in this morning. I read your article last week, or I read your column last week, and I was just absolutely enthralled by it, that it answers a question I think a lot of us out there are trying to get answers to, which is, why don't Republicans fight back right now in what is going on in this country? It seems like they can't make an argument at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's a structural problem that the people who run the Republican Party don't represent the majority, but they surely can't take an issue like illegal immigration and make a populist argument that it hurts low-income workers, that it violates the sanctity of the law, it benefits elites in the corporate world and the La Raza identity politics industry, and it's not fair to people abroad who are waiting in line to get into the country legally. So it violates almost every principle of the Republican Party, and yet the elites and the establishment want to go ahead with it. You
make a case in the article, Mr. Hanson, that never has the liberal agenda been so vulnerable. A logical development when you see bad ideas that have had 5 years kind of to prove themselves, and yet the Republicans can't seem to take that on. Is there an effort here to kind of try to make it softer, gentler? We saw what happened with...
I think so. I think they feel that they got close with John McCain and they got close with Mitt Romney, and rather the problem, I think their base believes that they got close and they'll never get closer with those types of wishy-washy candidates, and they think we got closer. If we get even more wishy-washy, we'll get even closer. And so I think there's a perception of a lot of factotums in Congress that we don't really mind if we don't win the presidency as long as the Congress is Republican and we get close. And the base is saying, you know what, we're never going to overturn this statist agenda unless we get the presidency, and we need a dynamic person who can articulate issues, who can say, you know what, gun control is something that the lawful middle class need. This Federal Reserve policy of no interest is killing small passbook holders that don't get any money on their lifetime savings, while it rewards these stock market grandees, and they could go down on every one of these issues. Obamacare is a tax on poor young people with student debt and transferring that money to people who are more affluent and who will use the care far more than the young people. College is a $1 trillion bubble placed on young kids going to college who basically are not getting the skills necessary to be competitive in the job market, and it's an institution it's about as corrupt as you can get. Administrators making tons of money and growing, part-time teachers being exploited, populist issues, education, yet they don't want to make that argument. And it's a mistake.
You know, the problem that I have today is we lack authenticity. And I read your article and I come away thinking we lack authenticity in our arguments today. Republicans aren't very good at speaking the political that Democrats seem to throw around on a regular basis. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it is. I mean, why can't a Republican just stand up and say, why have we had zero interest for the last 5 years when my aunt, who taught school all her life, has $58,000 in the bank and it's worthless because she's losing money on it? That's not good for people. Or why can't they say, my uncle has a gun and he lives in a bad neighborhood and he's legal, but he's not an illegal criminal who kills people in Chicago, and he's not a wealthy Malibu movie star who outsources his security to armed guards. He's just an average guy and he needs the Second Amendment. Or why can't we just say, I've got another brother who, he's working at a hotel clerk and everybody's coming from Mexico taking these cheap jobs and other people won't work, and he's got a kid in the school and nobody speaks English in the school and he's got to pay for it, and he's a nice guy and you're calling him a racist. This isn't good. But they can't articulate things like that. They've been in Washington too long. Yeah,
you deal with the subject of diversity, and I see all these people have diversity days and all these kind of things. And again, Republicans kind of tiptoe on the eggs going into this particular subject. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, what is diversity? Diversity is not having a bunch of Mormons and Catholics and Muslims. It's not religious. No, the left's not interested in that. It's not interested in having a bunch of blacks or Indians or whites or Hispanics that are all different political persuasions. They're not interested in that. It's a bunch of upper middle class, identity politics experts getting at university conferences or reporters who were very affluent, an Eric Holder type, Hilda Solis type, Barack Obama type, and then wanting special privileges from the majority, even though economically they're pretty well off. And in diversity, I mean, it's unsustainable. I like the NBA. I have no problem that it's 70, 90% African American. I have no problem with the post office that it's 18% African American. I have no problem with UC Berkeley that's 50% Asian. But why then does diversity apply somewhere and somewhere else? In other words, do we really want, if somebody's mad that Jerry Seinfeld only has white male actors, are we also mad that an Asian can't make the LA Lakers? Should we have a quota for that? Or are we mad that white people were 42% of the population of California or only 36% the population of UC Berkeley? Do we really want to go down that road? Because that's where it leads in a multiracial society, that each group then has a innate claim on some type of institution according to the percentage of the population. I don't know what diversity means. Is Eric Holder's children, are they going to be oppressed? It seems to me they'll have insider contacts, just as if they were the regular prep schoolers. Sidwell friends, where Obama's daughters go, are they going to need diversity? I think diversity is a word for very wealthy upper middle class people. And when out here in California, some white male kid from Tulare or Bakersfield whose parents didn't go to college, he has a lot less opportunity than somebody that can use affirmative action and diversity in the upper middle class. So diversity is nice in theory, but when you factor in class and income, it doesn't mean much.
But you know what's interesting about it, and one of the things that I've often thought, in reading your article, this raised a thought in my head too, that diversity is. I mean, diversity is just a natural thing, and the thing we ought to be celebrating is the fact that diversity into assimilation, which is really what we're looking for here. Diversity does not stand by itself, but the beauty of our culture is supposed to be, I think, unless I missed something in my history class I taught, which is then flowing into assimilation and everyone becoming an American in the long run.
Yeah, that's what it is. It wasn't a multicultural, it was a multiracial society. Everybody would speak English. If you were black or brown, Lincoln would be your guy. If you were white, maybe the Four Tops would be your favorite singer. Race was become insignificant as everybody adopted a common culture. But then a lot of very wealthy liberal people, progressives in the 1980s and 90s said, you know what? Each particular group is going to be identified by a tribal affiliation forever. And they don't have to assimilate, or they get certain set-asides. And then all of a sudden everybody said, well, you know, my son married a Mexican-American, and they've got a kid, and he married an Asian, and they're 1/3 this and 1/8 this. And what are they? Yeah. What happens? Or I have a brother, you know, who's half Mexican-American, and suddenly he added an accent in his name, and he's diverse. So it's so corrupt now because the intermarriage is going on, and it's not sustainable. So I think it'll finally fade because we're going to have to invent the old Confederacy's race laws so everybody has a genealogy that knows, you know, what third and what fourth. If you're a Punjabi and you're very dark complected, you get set-asides. If you're Hispanic, 1/8 Hispanic, and you're very light-skinned, you get set aside. When does it end? When does it begin? It's a mess. Once you start looking at people as at skin color rather than the content of their character, you can imagine where it leads. It leads to the Balkans or Rwanda or something like that. I don't think we want to go there, but we're going there.
Yeah, and whether we want to or not right now. You know, the president, we're going to have a big state dinner at the White House tonight for the French president. You know, we're putting out all the lavish things that are going to be out there. And I'm wondering to myself, as a leader in this country, shouldn't we be able to say, you know what, things aren't that great for the common guy out here on Main Street right now. Maybe I ought to kind of pull back on my vacations or some of these lavish dinners or some of the things I'm doing if I fly my wife to New York for the night for a date. Your thoughts about that?
Well, that used to be the Democratic modus operandi. That's what Harry Truman said. I'm going to dress like an average guy. I'm going to walk around. I'm not going to get in a limousine. When I get out of office, I'm going to go back to Independence, Missouri. So that Hubert Humphrey used to say that. But you got to remember, the Democratic Party now is different. It's an alliance between very poor people and very, very wealthy people. You know, the Bill Gates, John Kerrys, the John Edwards, the Al Gores, Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, Barbara Boxer, very, very wealthy elite people whose basic motto is, because I'm so wonderful and so brilliant and so powerful, I am exempt from the ramifications of my own ideology. So if I'm Barack Obama, I really like hanging around with celebrities. I like them to come to the White House. I like my wife going to Costa del Sol. I like hanging out at Martha's Vineyard. And then I feel a little guilty about it, so I say, you know, I'm for the people. I'm for the folks.
Yeah.
And they don't like the middle class, and they detest the upper middle class. It lacks the romance of the poor, and it lacks the culture of the very wealthy. So they really hate the guy who has an asphalt paving company who's making $300,000 and buys jet skis or a Winnebago. That guy that's the guy who should be taxed. They don't like him at all, and it's really a war against the upper middle class in this administration.
We're talking with Victor Davis Hanson this morning. Mr. Hanson, one of the things that we get into, the president is holding back on approving the Keystone XL pipeline through the Secretary of State, obviously, who's sitting on a report right now and can come back to the president whenever he wants to. We have the president saying, hey, we've drilled more during my administration than any other time, and yet a lot of that's been on private land. Populist arguments need to be made on those kind of things. And again, the press we know is going to be on the side of the president. They're going to make sure they cherry pick whatever they want to. So how do the Republicans overcome that? How do the Republicans stand up? And who are the Republicans out there, or not even Republicans, just regular people, conservatives, stand up?
I would say, the people who are against the Keystone Pipeline are the people, if you put an arc welder in front of them, they'd say, what's that?
Yeah.
And the people for them either have people that use them or have used them themselves, or they can see, or have relatives. They know what an arc welder is. And so Nancy Pelosi or Barack Obama, they're never in their entire lives, their children's lives, or grandchildren are going to have anybody that has to make a living with an arc welder. As far as Canada being our best ally, they don't know anything about history. They don't know anything about World War I, World War II, and they don't realize we have certain obligations to the Canadians. It would be wonderful to pay them back for their goodwill by building this pipeline. They don't even care about science, and they don't want to make the equation this many spills by locomotive, this fewer spills by pipeline. All that Barack Obama knows is a bunch of Google executives, billionaire Facebook people, inherited money people. They all have this boutique idea that I feel so good in my Malibu compound with my 3 nannies and 4 groundskeepers and my $20 million view of the Pacific. I feel so good that I stopped the Keystone Pipeline, and I don't feel guilty anymore about what I have because I stopped Keystone.
Yep.
And they don't really care about geostrategy. They don't care about the middle class. They don't care about jobs. That's what liberalism has become. It's become a medieval idea that I feel guilty, but I don't want to give it up, so I have to come up with an abstract issue that I can support that doesn't affect me.
Yeah, I've got mine. Now I can tell you why you shouldn't get yours. And,
it
that
really
kind of thing.
is. Here in California, let's stop all the water for agriculture and send it out the Pacific Ocean to help this 3-inch fish, and then nobody will get mad that I have granite counters and wood floors and a $5 million home in San Francisco.
One of the big arguments out there, and you alluded to it in the beginning, but gun control. And every time there's gun violence in the country, everybody says, "Oh, need more gun laws." And I've used the example a couple of times. I said, can you imagine somebody getting ready to buy some illegal guns out of the back of a car, and then someone said, they passed a new gun law today. Oh my God, I can't do it now. It's so silly anymore to even talk that way, isn't it?
Well, yeah. The people who buy guns legally and use them for hunting or the protection of their families don't commit crimes with them. The people who commit crimes either break the gun laws in our inner cities and shoot people, and they get the guns regardless of what the law is, or very wealthy people are protected by trained security guards. I'm teaching one day a week at Pepperdine University, and I drive by the Malibu compounds, and they've all got these very tasteful SUVs that have security guards by the gates. They're all armed. And so basically it's this populist concern of mine where the very wealthy say, you know what, we don't want you to have guns, but the guy behind the curtain that's protecting me and my privilege, he's got a gun. And I don't go in the inner city, and I don't live near the inner city like you do, so I don't need a gun by my bedstead. And that's the argument, and the Republicans need to make that. They need to say, you know what, we've got a new Republican Party, and we're looking at this person who gets up every morning and makes between $40 and $250, that family household income. Those are the guys who they make America go. We want to help the poor. We don't want to punish the very, very wealthy, but that's middle class, upper middle class, are the people we're after. And if they can't make that argument, then they don't deserve to win.
Mr. Hanson, final thought, and you said there's a populist case to be made in each of these areas that we talked about this morning. But you talk about the Republicans better get off their duffs right now and be making an argument, or they're going to be demagogued to death by the privileged.
Oh yeah, they think they don't understand what's coming up with this midterm election. We know what's happening. As soon as this thing heats up in September and October, we're going to hear they hate women, they hate gays, they hate blacks, they hate Chicanos, they're nativists, they're xenophobes. So all the schmoozing with Mr. Senator McConnell, all Mr. Cantor, Mr. Boyner, all that stuff is not going to do them one shred of good, because when this thing comes up, they're going to turn on them, as they always turn on them, and create these phony wars about how insensitive they are. And they need to reply back and say, you know what, it doesn't work anymore. We're worried about the economic viability of the middle class that you guys have helped destroy, because you like elite, wealthy people, and you romanticize poor people, and you don't care about anybody in between.
Aside from your own, do you see any voices out there that are willing to stand tall and put aside?
Yeah,
all
I do. I mean, Rand Paul saying some of these candidates, like Mr. Cotton in Arkansas, are running for Senate. Yeah, there's people out there, Ted Cruz. What they need to do is think very carefully, how are they going to try to destroy me, and how can I adjust my tactics in advance so I'm not vulnerable to them.
And make sure that the message is far more is far more important than maybe their future employment, right?
Exactly.
Mr. Hanson, it's an honor having you aboard this morning. Thank you so much, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you, and have a great day. Victor Davis Hanson with us this morning here on the Gary Sutton Show. You can read him regularly. Go to Real Clear Politics. You'll see his articles in there all the time, or you can Google him. And great piece this morning. Yeah. A beat-up, exhausted, and terrified Republican establishment. Ain't it the truth? Really, ain't it the truth? They're afraid to make an argument. They're afraid to make it in language that we understand.